From calls to annihilate Japan back in 1945
Yeah.
to rebuilding Hiroshima as like a peace memorial city just a few years later.
Right.
It's quite a shift, don't you think? I mean, what happened? This deep dive explores how the U.S. occupation of Japan after World War II drastically reshaped the nation, its relationship with America, and its place in the world.
Oh, it's a period of just incredible transformation, full of unexpected twists and turns. We'll be looking at how anxieties about the Cold War and even the influence of one single really powerful banker played a role.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me how U.S. policy towards Japan did a complete 180 after the war.
Yeah.
What were the key turning points in your view?
Well, you have to remember the initial sentiment in the U.S. right at the end of World War II. We're talking 1944-45. Polls showed a real desire for revenge against Japan. Some Americans even wanted to completely destroy the country or execute Emperor Hirohito.
Yeah, some senators were even proposing things like gutting the heart of Japan with fire and making them pay dearly through their blood in the ashes of their cities. It was a very different climate from the one that led to the rebuilding efforts.
Absolutely. There was this understandable anger after years of, brutal war. But amidst all of this, the initial U.S. policy for occupied Japan as laid out in the initial post-surrender policy for Japan, or SWNCC 1504A, focused on demilitarization, dismantling industries, and promoting democratic ideals.
So what exactly was SWNCC 1504A? What kind of impact did it have?
It was a top-secret document that outlined the initial goals for the occupation. Think of it as like the blueprint for reshaping Japan. It focused on things like disarming the military, breaking up these powerful industrial conglomerates called zaibatsu, and establishing a democratic system of government. It essentially set the stage for the occupation.
Okay, so they wanted to prevent Japan from being a military threat and transform it into a democratic society. But didn't things start to change pretty quickly?
Yes, by 1947 there was a noticeable shift. The containment doctrine became absolutely central to U.S. foreign policy, aiming to prevent the spread of communism. This had a huge impact on how the U.S. viewed Japan.
And that's where George Kennan and William Draper come in, right?
Exactly. Kennan, often called the father of containment, he was worried about a weak Japan falling under communist influence. And Draper, who was this prominent banker, believed that rebuilding Japan's economy would help prevent that.
So they basically teamed up to make Japan a strong capitalist ally against communism.
You could say that. It was a very strategic alliance. They saw Japan's potential to become a bulwark against the spread of communism in Asia.
So for our listener, this is a prime example of how global politics can just dramatically change course, with consequences that ripple through history. What started as a mission to punish Japan turned into a mission to rebuild it as a strategic ally. And this shift had a profound impact on how Japan rebuilt, particularly in the case of Hiroshima, which we'll explore next. It's hard to even imagine what Hiroshima was like after the atomic bombing.
Yeah.
I remember reading this account by Shuichi Kato. He visited the city in November 1945, and it was just chilling.
Yeah.
Eyewitness accounts like that really bring history to life, don't they?
They really do. Kato described Hiroshima as like a wasteland. Not a single living tree, just scorched earth as far as the eye could see. People were suffering from radiation sickness, and hospitals were overwhelmed with the injured and dying.
It's heartbreaking. The city was essentially wiped off the map. So how did Hiroshima even begin to rebuild after such devastation? Was it just about bricks and mortar, or was there a deeper vision at play?
It was a monumental challenge. Resources were incredibly scarce. The economy was in ruins, and there were political challenges at every turn. The initial efforts to rebuild under the War Damage Reconstruction Plan faced a lot of obstacles, especially the lack of funding. Imagine trying to rebuild a city from scratch when the entire nation's economy is devastated.
Yeah, must felt impossible at times. But then, in 1949, the Hiroshima Peace Memorial City Construction Law was passed. This wasn't just some local initiative. It was a national commitment to rebuild Hiroshima as a symbol of peace.
It was a really powerful statement. This law made land transfers easier, allocated funding, and showed that the whole nation was behind Hiroshima's reconstruction. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, that desire to create something positive out of unimaginable tragedy.
And that's where architect Tanji Kenzo comes in. His design for the Peace Memorial Park and Museum is stunning. It's not just about forgetting the past, but about remembering it and learning from it.
Yeah, and one of the most insightful aspects of Tanji's design is the incorporation of the Genbaku Dome, the ruined industrial promotion hall, right in the heart of the park.
It's a pretty powerful symbol, isn't it? taking a structure that represents Japan's industrial past and its colonial ambitions, and transforming it into a reminder of the horrors of war.
It really is. The decision to leave the Genbaku Dome standing speaks volumes about the power of symbolism and repurposing the past. And it's not just the dome. The park itself is built on land that used to be Hiroshima's main business district. By choosing that location for a peace memorial, the city was making a deliberate choice to prioritize a different kind of future.
So from the ashes of war, Hiroshima rises as a symbol of peace. It's a truly remarkable story of resilience and transformation. We've talked about this just incredible transformation in Japan, but the U.S. occupation couldn't last forever, right?
Right. The San Francisco Peace Treaty, signed in 1951, officially ended the occupation. But it wasn't like a clean break, you know? The treaty allowed the U.S. to maintain a military presence in Japan, which caused a lot of tension.
And then Japan started to remilitarize under pressure from the U.S. It must have been a controversial move for a nation that had just experienced such devastating losses. How did the Japanese people react to that?
It was definitely a turbulent period. There were massive protests against remilitarization and the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the U.S. and Japan in 1960, which further strengthened the U.S. military presence. For many, it felt like a betrayal of Japan's pacifist constitution, which renounced war and the right to maintain a standing army.
So for our listener, this is important because it shows how complicated this whole period was. Japan's constitution basically says no war, but they're also building up their military because of pressure from the U.S.
Exactly. It highlights the complex legacy of the U.S. occupation. On the one hand, the U.S. helped rebuild Japan and fostered its economic recovery, but it also exerted significant influence on its defense policies, leading to internal conflict.
And then there's the fact that the U.S. transferred advanced nuclear research in plutonium to Japan in the late 1970s. That's a decision loaded with implications. What message do you think that sent to the world?
Well, it was a strategic move during the Cold War, but it's definitely a controversial one. It's almost paradoxical. A nation that experienced the horrors of the atomic bomb, now possessing the technology to build them.
It really makes you think. This deep dive has shown us how Japan went from the brink of destruction to becoming a symbol of peace and a key U.S. ally, all within a few decades. It's an incredible story.
It really is. It's a testament to the resilience of the Japanese people and a fascinating example of how global events and individual choices can shape a nation's destiny.
Absolutely. We've just scratched the surface. But hopefully this has given you a better understanding of this really complex period in history. It leaves us with some thought-provoking questions, though. What does the future hold for the U.S.-Japan relationship? How will Japan balance its pacifist constitution with its growing military role in the region? These are questions worth exploring further.
Yeah, there's always more to discover, isn't there? And that's what makes history so fascinating.